Propulsion continues to be nominal.
Alright, the chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Right away with planet.
Water towers can fly!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight downside, SCE off. Bring in, SCE off.
Yikes. You bet.
Concur.
We don't need any more of these.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to what you can see is a very, very, very wet and soggy Kennedy Space Center and Pad 39A, where a Falcon 9 is about to be loaded with its liquid oxygen and RP-1 kerosene ahead of the planned liftoff of the CRS-26 mission for NASA and SpaceX up to the International Space Station. That launch is currently tracking to 3:54 and 3 seconds p.m. Eastern Time, which is just about 36 minutes from now. And SpaceX has indeed pulled go for propellant loading. And yeah, as you can see, it is raining very heavily, but here to join me for commentary for this mission is Mr. Alex. Alex, how is it going for you today?
It's also a little bit rainy here, but definitely less rainy than that. That's nasty weather. Yeah, looking forward to see what's the outcome today.
I think we are all very much looking forward to that. And also, I guess I should also introduce myself. I forgot to do that. I am Chris Gebhardt. I am the Assistant Managing Editor for NASASpaceflight, and I am your host for this particular stream as we have crossed the T-minus 35-minute mark, which means that propellant loading is underway, as is the auto sequence. And also joining us today, not on comms, but behind the scenes, pushing the buttons and pulling all the levers to make the photons flow to you around the world, is Mr. Michael Baylor. And Michael, thank you very much for all of that assistance and production and direction behind the scenes. And yeah, I think, Alex, we should definitely start with the question that is on everybody's mind here. None of that looks good from a weather perspective here. And the forecast indeed wasn't very promising for today. There was only a 10% chance of acceptable weather here. And as you can see, here's another view, and you can really see how bad it is. But yeah, weather not looking great, but there's the next backup opportunity isn't until Saturday. So if the weather is a problem today, why the delay to Saturday?
Yeah, so part of that is Thanksgiving. There's a holiday in the U.S. named Thanksgiving for those of us like me that are not from the U.S. and that's this Thursday. And so part of that implies that the FAA has put forward, both the FAA and the Eastern Range have put forward a plan to keep the airspace clear during those days, or at least, the day of and the day prior and day after, to be able to, not disturb the whole country's airspace flow, because it will mean closing part of the eastern part of the airspace, so that could disrupt the whole flow of airplanes and flights and everything. So in order to not disrupt that during an important holiday like Thanksgiving, they're clearing that out. So that's one of the reasons, and the other reason is that they had an opportunity probably on tomorrow on Wednesday, but they were thinking that the orbital mechanics to get to the ISS will imply a longer phasing than they will like to. So instead, they just jump to Saturday. That's a nice day, both from a Thanksgiving point of view and also from a phasing standpoint. The orbital mechanics do allow a nice phasing time for that. So that's the next backup opportunity. Then the following one after that is the 27th. So if they don't go on Saturday, they also have the Sunday. And after that, we really don't know yet. But But that's the 2 backup dates that we have for this mission.
Excellent, excellent. And also joining us on stream here for commentary for this launch attempt of CRS-26, the man who is actually there, Mr. Thomas Berghart. Thomas, how are you doing today? I would ask if you're dry, but I don't think that's a valid question.
No, I think you probably know the answer to that one, Chris. It's not too bad. We got a tent over my head. I'll deal with that. It's windy, it's wet. Falcon 9 is being propellant loaded, so potentially just putting the wet and wet dress rehearsal. We'll have to wait and see. But they're going to give this a shot and see if the weather can cooperate in about half an hour.
Indeed, and we will see if it can. I know looking at the radar right now, it's sort of like this weird C-shaped band of rain that extends from to the south, Melbourne and Palm Bay, and then it goes all the way up and skirts the coastline up to New Smyrna here in Florida. And the rain is definitely just on and offshore here from Launch Complex 39A, and that is definitely the 90% no-go potentiality here. But SpaceX, no stranger to this. The CRS-24 mission in December of last year had a very similar abysmal weather forecast, and lo and behold, that magical 10% emerged at the last minute. And up they went to the International Space Station. So we will definitely see. But as we continue to march down, many of you already sending in your questions, but if you haven't already, go ahead and tag us at NASASpaceflight in chat, and that lets your question pop up in a queue that Michael has written and be grabbed by some of the software so that it flags it for us. So right off the bat, thank you to Blackhawk New Zealand for the for the support. No question, just support. Love it. Moldy Space Industries saying, looks like we need the hashtag Thomas fan club to aim all their fans at the pad today. Yes, blow all of the precipitation off shore, and maybe we might get it clear from the range, but I think some cumulus clouds are also in play here today, which might also be a lightning rule that is in effect for the liftoff as well. Musical Wolves noting, did the RS-25s make it rain? Just kidding. I mean, yes, the RS-25s, the water generators from the SLS, and now rain on Falcon 9's day. But no, just a frontal system that is actually hanging off the coast of Florida here. So all good on that front. But thank you so much for the support there, Musical Wolves. Bensa is also saying an Artemis 1 rain joke as well. And thank you guys so much for the support. Here, and Paul, you are correct. It has not scrubbed yet, and they are counting down, but you can see very wet so far still at the Kennedy Space Center today. And Alex, here's a good question, Alex and Thomas, about the propellant. So Alex is asking in chat, how much propellant would they lose, or do they lose when they fuel Falcon 9 and then have to scrub?
Well, they probably lose a little bit of, not the fuel itself, because that's not cryogenic, but the liquid oxygen is cryogenic and it boils off. So you lose some of it, but most of it, like probably more than 90% of it, is just drained back from the tanks. And yeah, you lose some percentage though. Yep.
Gotcha, but they get the vast majority of it back, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we don't know. It's like the exact percent of how much of it gets lost to boil off, but it's probably no more than 10%, I will guess.
Yeah, because SpaceX doesn't really talk about that element of the equation, but we do know that the overall propellant loss is very low in this type of situation. Very good question there. Thank you very much. Another good question from Patrick here for Thomas. Is the launch window instantaneous, or do they have a window to work with today?
Great question. Today's mission is to the International Space Station, and thus, while targeting that exact orbital plane, you will get an instantaneous launch window. Depending on different launch vehicles, sometimes you have a couple seconds or a couple minutes on either side for kind of a little bit of wiggle room, and that's just based on the vehicle's steering, basically, as it launches to give yourself a little bit of room. But Falcon 9, once it has started fueling and targeting a specific T0, cannot adjust that T0. So it is an instantaneous launch window. Like Chris said, it's 3 seconds after the minute at 3:54 local time.
Indeed. And if they should lift off today, that would set them up for a docking of this particular cargo dragon to the forward port of the Harmony module, or Node 2 of the International Space Station, tomorrow morning on Wednesday at 5:57 a.m. Eastern Time or 10:57 UTC. Again, that would assume a liftoff today. And if they can't lift off today, the next backup opportunity, as we said, would be on Saturday due to a combination of factors, including phasing to the International Space Station and the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday. But Thomas, another interesting point here today is this isn't SpaceX's only launch attempt from Florida today, is it?
Well, in theory, again, we'll have to wait and see what this one does and how the weather acts later today. But yesterday, SpaceX stood down from another Falcon 9 launch from the neighboring, well, I guess it's technically not neighboring, 2 doors down pad of Space Launch Complex 40 for the Eutelsat 10B mission to geostationary transfer orbit. That mission was stood down yesterday to allow time for additional pre-flight checkouts. So not actually a weather issue, even though the weather was also not cooperating yesterday. But they, as of earlier today, said they might still be on track for that launch later as well. I think that'll be a similar situation to this mission. Keep an eye on the weather and see how it's acting closer to launch time. But in theory, if they can find a hole for CRS and give the other one attempt at around 9:57 p.m. Eastern Time, potential for a double header from here on the Space Coast. But again, weather has to cooperate, which isn't looking super great. And we'll just have to wait and see. Even if they do scrub this launch, they could still try the Eutelsat launch if weather clears up, of course. So one not necessarily dependent on the other, but potential for a doubleheader, weather permitting. Yes.
Yes, indeed. Awesome. Thank you very much there, Thomas. And Alex, Logan here with a good question. Does SpaceX reuse the Dragon capsules? And this is a good question because it's a rare full first flight everything almost on
Yeah.
this Falcon, isn't it?
Yeah, the cargo dragon flying here is flying for its first time. It is the third, and so far at least, it's probably gonna be the last cargo Dragon 2 that they're gonna be building. As of their fleet of Dragon 2 vehicles, they're gonna build another Crew Dragon. That's another thing that they've also said in the pre-launch news conference for this flight. But yeah, this is an all new rocket. The Cargo Dragon spacecraft is new, and its serial number is C211.1, which is the sort of the serial number in the sequence. And then the first stage is B1076, and I'm sure it's a little bit weird, right, Chris? Like, I feel like it's a little bit weird. I don't see the Falcon 9 logo, for example.
Yeah, that's part of the other thing too, right? You might also be noticing that the livery on this particular booster doesn't really look like a regular Falcon 9. In fact, it's more the livery and paint scheme of a Falcon Heavy side booster, and that's because booster 1076.1, which this is today making its first flight, is indeed earmarked to be a Falcon Heavy side booster later on in its career. It is launching the CRS-26 mission today as a Falcon 9 because the Falcon Heavy side boosters are the same as Falcon 9s. You just take the interstage off and put the nose cone on instead, and they are reconfigurable, whereas the Falcon Heavy center cores are Falcon Heavy center cores, and they have to be dedicated like that because of the upgrades that are needed there. You can also see in this excellent view being provided to us from NASA and SpaceX of the Dragon capsule. Team Worm represented there on the capsule. Very, very nice. And you can also see a crane and a structure making a peekaboo appearance above Dragon there. And Alex, that is the Starship section of Pad 39A, is it not?
Yes, we have there the Starship pad, the Starship launch tower, and it's a little bit eerie. Like the whole background itself, it's like clouds. You can barely see the ocean. Um, it's really weird to see all of this Starship plus Falcon stuff together.
Indeed. And as we continue to count down here, 21 and a half minutes to go, we are going to be standing by for the T-minus 20-minute, 20-second event maneuver that Falcon 9 does to let us know that it is nice and happy on the pad. But a good question here that came in from BC, who's asking, why can't they launch cargo dragons from Slick 40 since it's not crewed? Is the crew access arm still needed for CRS missions? Which those are two really great questions. So the technical answer is that the cargo 2 dragons like these that are launched and have the access arms, and they look very similar to the crew dragons for their similar designs, they can actually be launched from either pad. So they could launch a Dragon 2 cargo mission from Slick 40 on the Cape side. However, it is far easier to launch them from 39A because they still have the side hatch, and that is great for loading cargo late at the launch pad. Much more easier for the crews to get it all up there and get it into Dragon. Hearing some mission control audio callouts, or rather launch control audio callouts there as well. But yes,
the call for T-minus 20-minute vent.
Indeed it is. So that should mean that we are, or rather Falcon 9 is venting away happily. If you can see it there in that live look of what it looks like right now. There we go. You can see the 20-minute vent happening there from 39A and this vent in this camera vantage point there. But yeah, very good question. They can technically launch the cargo dragons from either pad. They just prefer 39A in that regard.
And actually, when Dragon 1 was around, it was primarily launched from Slick 40. And the way that they actually did the late load, for example, was from a van that was attached to Dragon while it was horizontal on the ground. So it was kind of sketchy, but they were able to do that. So it's probably a matter of, coming up with a way of actually doing that on Dragon 2, since it's different and all that. But eventually, that's also the idea that, they're going to be coming back to Pad 40 with crew and cargo. Well, with cargo and then eventually also with crew. Which is going to be a little bit weird, having another tower at 40, and but we'll see how that will look like.
Indeed. And Strix with a very good question. What does CRS stand for? Very good question. We always say on these streams, if we all ever say an acronym that you're unfamiliar with, please ask us what it means. Because yeah, NASA really loves acronyms. So CRS stands for Cargo Resupply Services. So it's the overall acronym for the big program that NASA has that SpaceX, Northrop Grumman, and Arianespace, formerly Sierra Nevada, who's building Dream Chaser, are all a part of for the transportation of cargo up to and back from the International Space Station. Some of those cargo contracts, like the one for SpaceX, include bringing things back safely to Earth. Dream Chaser from Arianespace will be able to do that as well. And then specifically for Northrop Grumman, their Cygnus vehicle is used to dispose of all of the stuff that does not need to come back, all the experiments that have transmitted all their data, all the trash and stuff from the crew that can just burn up in the atmosphere, and Cygnus is really good at doing those types of things as well. So, but yeah, CRS just stands for Commercial Resupply Services in this regard. Roz asking, are there any people on board this rocket? And no, this is not a crew flight of the Dragon capsule. This is its cargo variant. And Alex, let's talk a little bit about some of that cargo that is on board, right? Because it is also around the holidays. So it's not just all the science experiments and regular stuff that we assume and know that goes up to the ISS, but there's holiday treats and stuff on board this one too.
Yes. Right now they're launching on this mission 2,630 kilograms approximately. That in pounds is 5,800 pounds, and part of that also includes a set of CubeSats, for example, as well, and science investigations and things like that. Some of the rundown here on the CubeSats, I think they are like super crazy.
Stage
Exciting
2
because
lock mode has
it's like,
started.
well, there you go. Stage
So that
2
means
looks
we
low.
have
Has it started?
crossed the 16.5-minute mark,
Woo!
right on time there.
We're getting there. Yeah, so there are 4 CubeSats going on this Cargo Dragon, which is, to me, it's a little bit crazy because they launch those and then they are not deployed until like many weeks later from the space station. It's like a little bit weird. It's not like your small sat kind of rocket kind of thing. And it's super important because it's also partly from universities as well. There's one that is like just testing new structures made of piezoelectric materials, which are materials that are basically they react against pressures and things like that. They also have 2 space weather satellites, which are at least to me, space weather is very important because we see in the past that the space weather has affected satellites, especially SpaceX satellites. But these missions are more like about studying the ionosphere. When it's basically studying the bubbles that sometimes form in the ionosphere when there's like a satellite, not a satellite, excuse me. There's like a plasma bubble on the ionosphere coming from just the space weather from the sun, the coronal mass ejections and things like that. And then there's another one just studying the density of the ionosphere and their irregularities and things like that, which is very important for radio frequency communications. So that's some of the stuff going on in that sense. There's also a lot of other scientific investigations as well. But more importantly, this Cargo Dragon is not only carrying things on the capsule itself, but I think it's also carrying a few things on the trunk, right, Chris?
Yes, indeed. And this actually goes directly into James Atkinson's question. Is there anything in the trunk of this Dragon? Because Dragon, it doesn't just have to take pressurized cargo up inside of its capsule. It has a big trunk on the back of it, and it likes to bring a lot of big external experiments up to the International Space Station. And in fact, right now, it is the only vehicle that is capable of doing such a feat. And inside of the trunk for Dragon are the next 2 of the first 6, the next 4 of the 6 IROSAs, the International Space Station Rollout Solar Arrays. This is part of a plan between NASA and Boeing to augment the power generating capability of the 8 main arrays that were launched by the space shuttles between 2000 and 2009. Over time, those solar cells, the photovoltaic cells that actually grab the energy and everything from the sun and convert it into the electrical energy that we then use on board the International Space Station, those cells degrade over time as expected. So the ISS is not producing the maximum amount of power it used to be able to at a time period where its science demand is going through the roof and more modules are coming with the Axiom additions to the station. So this plan by NASA and Boeing will install 6 IROSA, International Space Station Rollout Solar Arrays, what IROSA stands for, over 6 of the existing arrays. And that will actually bring the station's power back up to what it used to be capable of doing back when it was first constructed. And that's really going to help with a lot of the science experiments that are planned over the next several years. And because these are the second set that are going up, there are some slight modifications to them from the originals. They are, for all intents and purposes, the same. But one thing you always do as you're adding these things to the ISS is you listen to what the crew members who have to handle them and manipulate them in space are telling you it was actually like versus what you're training for in the pool, in the big neutral buoyancy lab pool on the ground. And what they discovered installing the first 2 sets last year was that they were a little bit more difficult to keep a firm grip on and a grip on for a long period of time as they were working to install them. So some of the crew interface grips and handrails on the IROSAs launching today are different to account for those lessons learned and feedback from the original spacewalking crews. And in fact, if all goes to plan with a launch here today or later this weekend, weather permitting, the IROSAs launching on this mission will be installed in late November or early December. So good rundown there of what is on board. And we also said that, there are holiday treats and stuff for the crew on board this particular on board this particular cargo dragon. But for us terrestrial beings who have to celebrate the holiday here on terra firma, there's also some good merch that we've got over in our store for you all, including our holiday collection. And who doesn't like a Merry Xmars holiday sweater? Especially with all those, like office parties and sweater contests that come around this time of year, everything that you want there. And also greeting cards. A lot of people love to send greetings this time of year. And this design, made by the wonderfully talented Pauline Acklin, has a lot of little Easter eggs in the design as you pan your way around Mars there. And of note, it comes in several different varieties. It comes in sweater form for those of us in cold climates. It comes in t-shirt form for those of us who live in countries that abstain from the cold part of this time of the season. It comes in mugs for tea and coffee, and also, as I said, to greeting cards, because a lot of people do love to send greeting cards this time of year. So if you are so inclined, definitely check out shop.nasaspaceflight.com on that one. That is another way that you can support what we do here at NASA Spaceflight. So with that, as we tick below the T-minus 10-minute mark, I want to say thank you to Kin for becoming a Capcom member. Membership through YouTube, that gets you access to our Discord. So if you love all of our banter and our funniness, now you get it 24/7. So enjoy that as well. And that was actually an upgrade from an initial Red Team membership. So thank you very much there. Taylor also saying, launch or no launch, love you guys. Shannon Salter saying, does this bribe help with the OG Thomas fan club see a launch in person this week? There we go. Well, I hope you get to see this one if it does launch. Hopefully, maybe. I hope. If not, you said weekend, so there might be others. There we go. But thank you very much. And yeah, let's go back to a question here from Joshua, and a very serious question as we do hit the business end of this countdown here, as the count ticks below 9 minutes. What are the weather effects here? So I mean, there you go. I mean, you can see conditions are not very optimal from a visibility standpoint. There is a 90% probability of violating the weather launch constraints today.
Oh, I have an update on that.
Yes, go ahead, Alex.
It's now to 70% violation.
Okay, so slightly
it went
better.
A little bit better, yeah. But
so I guess that's more the think good thoughts part of this, which has happened before. Remember, has happened before with CRS-24. But the main rules and the main things that they were worried about today are the thick cloud layer rule, the cumulus cloud rule, and flight through precipitation. Those are all range-imposed weather restraints. So even if a rocket launching from the Eastern Range in Florida were capable of totally surviving a lightning strike, totally capable of flying through precipitation, those are range-imposed restrictions based on our historical knowledge of how rockets interact with weather, or the potentially bad effects that can happen, especially with lightning. So when you hear things like the cumulus cloud rule, that's lightning. When you hear, flight through precipitation, that's just the potentiality for all of those different factors to interfere with communications, interfere with the ability of the range to track the vehicle. You're dealing with different elements here that are range imposed regardless of what the vehicle might be designed to handle. So part of that is what's in play here today. Now, what we can say is that upper level wind shear was a low risk today. Booster recovery weather looked good today, as did solar activity. It's really the weather, the launch site, that was the concern. And we'll see if that potential 30% go chance does indeed materialize here in the next few minutes. But under 7 minutes, Alex, what is currently going on with the Falcon 9 and what can we expect for the rest of the count?
Yeah, so right now they have entered engine chill on the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage. They're progressing through the propellant load. They should be coming up soon on wrapping up the RP1 load on the first stage. And then later on, we'll see wrapping up of the LOX load on both the stages. And we'll see if they actually go into startup and closer to T0. We'll see, because right now the weather doesn't look
Stage
good.
1 fuel load complete.
Well, there you go. Stage 1 fuel load is complete, just as expected. And they're still watching the clouds and like the weather and things like that. Even though it went to 30% go chances, right now they're still looking at that. We should be coming up soon also on the Stromback retract as well. And that's sort of the status right now of the whole countdown and rocket and everything.
Yeah. And Gina with a good question here. How many seconds of leeway, if at all, is there in an instantaneous window? Can they adjust their trajectory if they miss it by just a small amount? And the answer is actually no, they cannot. In this case, instantaneous means instantaneous. So they're aiming for 3:54 and 3 seconds. And that is it. There's no wiggle room for the Falcon 9 today for this. Other rockets sometimes do have windows that they can maneuver within. Like, for example, Antares and Cygnus have a 5-minute launch window to the International Space Station, and Atlas has even managed a 30-minute long launch window to the International Space Station. It ultimately just comes down to the rocket, the mass of the payload, and what the rocket
Dragon is in terminal count.
designed to do. But there we go. Dragon is in terminal count. So the next thing we should see visually here is the retraction of the strong back by a couple of degrees to 88.5 degrees to its pre-pullback position. As we watch that happening there, just wanted to also say thank you to Roger for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Wow, thank you very much for that. Hopefully, if you got one of those gifted Red Team memberships, let us know in chat. Always love to see that and welcome new members to the community. And Laura, as well, thank you for upgrading to Capcom. You clearly love our jokes and want to spend more time with us because Capcom and above gets you access to our Discord. And it is another way that you can support us as well with that monthly support because it really, really does mean a lot to us here. And at 4 minutes to go, a good question here from James. Thomas, what are those bulges on the side of the Dragon capsule?
Countdown net.
Oh, hang on.
Our launch weather officer has received his final set of data for today's launch attempt and is no-go for the opportunity. From a launch management standpoint, we will continue to count for the purposes of simplicity with our automation, and we'll stop at T-minus 60 seconds, at which time launch control will say the 3 magic words and end the launch attempt. So for now, clock will continue to count for an additional 2.5 minutes.
Alrighty there. Well, Thomas, never mind on that extra question there. But that is a scrub for today. Let's do a little bit of a briefing and breakdown of what that particularly means. What we heard them say is that the weather officer received the final
Stage
weather
1 lock load
packet
complete.
for today, and the weather was still no-go. And that the weather was still no-go for the attempt, which initiated the scrub. However, because the Falcon 9 countdown is very, very automated for its propellant loading and thermal sequencing of events, it is actually more efficient after a certain point to officially tell the team you're not launching, but you are going to continue with the auto sequence down to 30 seconds and cut off around there so that the vehicle actually maintains the proper limits that you want in it. And that is what we have seen happen here today, which actually, so Alex, when would that set up our next attempt? And I'm sorry, 60 seconds, not 30 seconds. To count to 60 seconds, not 30. And Alex, what does this do, Scrub today? What does this do in terms of setting up our next opportunity to launch CRS-26 to the space station?
Yeah, that will put us again on Saturday. The launch time goes back about 20 to 23 minutes. So, that times 4 days
Stage
until
2, lock
Saturday.
load complete.
Oh, there you go.
2:20
They're continuing with a countdown.
Dragon is in
2:20
auto
p.m.
idle.
Eastern.
Okay, yeah. So 22 to 22 minutes each day it goes back. So
2:20 p.m. Eastern.
2:20. Okay, yeah. I hadn't really looked it up. Sorry. Yeah. Right now they're closing in on that 60-second hold call that they're gonna
Yeah,
have
so
here.
let's listen to that call out here. About 13 seconds away from the official scrub of the automated sequence, even though the team has already
The
knows
water
they're not
tank.
proceeding below 1 minute here.
Hold, hold, hold. Launch abort has started.
And there it is.
Indeed, and you can see the vapors up there around the top of the vehicle as SpaceX is now into their launch abort operations on Launch Complex 39A following the official cutoff of the launch sequence at T-minus 60 seconds due to a weather-related scrub. While the weather forecast did improve from a 90% no-go forecast to a 70% no-go forecast, that 70% did materialize for SpaceX, resulting in a scrub of the CRS-26 mission for today. And I think this is something we all have a sentiment for. Our Eat, Sleep, Scrub, Repeat shirt is available for your holiday browsing as well, and other merchandise. But in terms of CRS-26, that will be the end of the coverage for this. A reminder, though, that there is at present another potential launch off of the Eastern Range tonight. That is the Eutelsat 10B flight of Falcon 9 from Slick 40, which is currently targeting no earlier than 9:57 Eastern time tonight, which would be 2:57 UTC. That is from neighboring Pad 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Weather permitting, that weather forecast also not looking overly fantastic, but we'll see if SpaceX can give that a go. And the next attempt for CRS-26, which scrubbed today, will be Saturday at 2:20 p.m. Eastern time, with a launch to the International Space Station on that day. With that, thank you so much for joining us, Alex. Thank you so much for being a part of this, even though we were not able to get Falcon 9 off the ground today.
Yeah, it's sad, but better to be on the ground wishing to be flying, right? That flying wishing to be in the ground. So yeah.
Exactly, and we definitely listened to the weather, having learned that lesson several times, having not done that. So yes, we always listen to the weather. And Thomas, thank you so much for being out there for this scrub for CRS-26, and hopefully the next one is not a scrub for you later tonight.
Yeah, we'll see. Stay tuned to the channel as well as our social media channels for updates on the second potential launch today. Even if that one doesn't go, we'll cover it whenever it is ready to go. This mission now delayed to no earlier than Saturday. We'll see what Eutelsat does tonight. But from here at the press site, we'll wrap up from now, and we'll hope to check in with you in a couple hours.
Indeed. And also a big thank you to Michael Baylor, who was our director and producer today behind the scenes, making the photons reach all of you out there around the world. So, Michael, thank you for all of that here today. as well. And thank you to all of you for joining us. That is going to wrap up our coverage for CRS-26. And stay tuned for information on our broadcast plans for Eutelsat later today. Until then, from a rainy and soggy Florida, later, nerds.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good. Doubling up. Roger roll, Atlantis.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight outside SCE off. Bring in SCE off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.